30,000. Raise 50,000.
All right, guys. I'm so sorry about that. Are you guys serious? This whole time I was talking. Thanks for uh thanks for letting me know. I'm very sorry about that. If you're watching this later on, not live, you get to fast forward to this part. So here we go again. Let's go give the speech again. Man. So at least you guys are enjoying the piano, at least a little bit in the background. So I was saying, we're gonna continue reading about giants. They kind of hated on me yesterday, guys. I was saying, so you know, they was like, hey, you can't do that. You gotta play by the rules. They're always monitoring me, making sure, they're looking for something to block my videos on, so I can't give them reasons to. So, but we left that for the Patreons. All my censored and blocked videos go to my Patreons, and they can watch the original versions. I share a lot of books there too as well. So welcome again tonight, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I was showing you guys today, Heiwa, right? Heiwa, Japanese word for peace, peace and blessings. Hawa, Heiwa, Hawa, Heiwa. Okay, no coincidence. That peace, that water, agua, water. Okay, okay. Let's get started. Now that we got audio and everything, we did a little practice run. I was doing a little practice run on my own, I guess. And we live, right? We live. So let's be patient. Make sure you like and share the video if you're here. I appreciate all the support. Make sure to, be respectful in the chat. No trolling. If you have anything to disagree with me about or any complaints about something I did to you in any other day about any other thing, you can contact me directly on my email, Telegram, Instagram, and we can get things resolved. No need to come to the chat and disturb anybody and distract. Just contact me directly. I answer everybody. So we're gonna read from chapter 2. We're gonna continue reading. Um, it says here, North America, land of the giants. While the idea of prehistoric giants inhabiting the United States may seem strange to us today or the result of some fantastic hoax, in the 19th century, reports of archaeological evidence regarding giants were commonplace. In addition, one must remember that America was an agrarian society at this time, and its citizens were in regular contact with their fields, as well as the mounds and the remains they found while plowing. Knowledge of the giants was part of the current thinking, as was a heightened awareness of who the mound builders really were. As this chapter demonstrates, highly credible reports of skeletons and artifacts from the eastern states to the Pacific Ocean appeared in newspapers across the country with surprising frequency. The fact that this idea seems so strange to us today can be directly attributed, at least in part, to the role the Smithsonian played in suppressing the evidence as attested by several of the reports documented here, okay? The Smithsonian hiding things. Is that why you guys blocked me? Okay, let's go. Here's a picture right here. You might have seen it in the cover. I was like, interesting. I've seen this picture online. Not sure if it's real or not. According to this book, it says giant skeleton from Serpent Mound in Athens County, Ohio. Okay, pretty big. Remember the reports. It was saying some of these skulls they were finding, you can put over a man's head, the jaw. You can put it right over a regular, a normal man's face. Or a modern. They're talking about average size, I guess, whatever that is today. But this is supposed to be a real picture right here. All right. It says here the Lenny Lenapi giants of the eastern United States. The Lenny Lenapi Indians were often referred to as a tribe of giants. Technically, their name translates as the real people, or the human beings in the Unami language. Their principal area of inhabitation encompassed much of southeastern New York State, including the lower Hudson River Valley and most of Long Island and Staten Island, as well as eastern Pennsylvania around Delaware and Lehigh valleys, in addition to the coastal regions that extended south to the north shore of Delaware. Another designation of the tribe was the original people, which is similar to the appellation of the copper cultured tribes of Michigan, which were called the Old People, and the Anasazi of the Southwest, who were called the Ancient Ones. Since their legends state that they originally migrated from the West, this is not surprising. All right. I don't know if you guys remember the video, the Annals of Kentucky, the book we read, amazing book by Rufinsky, and it was talking about this whole migration of the Lenape coming from the West and who their, I guess, ancestor kindred tribes were and where they stayed along the way. Lenny Lenapi legend relates what is no less than a mass exodus that began west of the Mississippi and involved the use of scouting parties that went out in search of suitable land. Although the legends are thought to be several hundred years old, research in Chapter 10 indicates that this migration may have happened as long as ago as 5000 BC as a result of the cataclysmic explosions of the Lassen volcano in California. Huh? Slash old Lemuria. The old ones, huh? Where they coming from? California, Lemuria. On that side of Asia, so-called Asia, North India Superior, Greater China. So the same right here. And we got a picture right here, supposedly of La Pawinsa, all right, a drawing. And it says, an account of the history, manners, and customs of the Indian nations who once inhabited Pennsylvania and the neighboring states, 1819, by Reverend John Gottlieb Ernestus Heckewelder. The Lenni Lenape, according to the legends handed down to them by their ancestors, resided many hundreds of years ago in a very distant country in the western part of the American continent. For some reason I do not find accounted for, they determined on migrating to the eastward, and accordingly set out together in a body. After a very long journey, they fell in with the Mengwe, the Iroquois. All right, we actually got that with the annals of the Kentucky, who likewise emigrated from a distant country. Their object was the same as with that of the Delawares. They were proceeding along to the eastward until they should find a country that pleased them. The spies which the Lenape had sent forward for the purpose of reconnoitering had discovered that the country east of the Mississippi was inhabited by a very powerful nation who had many large towns built on the great rivers flowing through their land. These people, as I was told, called themselves Talige or Taligewi. Colonel John Gibson, however, a gentleman who has a thorough knowledge of the Indians and speaks several of the languages, is of the opinion that they were not called Taligewi, but Aligawi, and it would seem that he is right from the traces of their name, which still remain in the country, the Allegheny River, and mountains having indubitably been named after them. The Delawares still call the former the Aligawi Sipu, the river of the Aligawi. All right, just getting started. Welcome. Chapter 2, Ancient Giants Who Ruled America. That's the book. Many wonderful things are told of this famous people. The Lenni Lenape eventually came in contact with the ancestor race of the Allegheny or Aligawi people, a race even greater in stature than the Lenni Lenape, and known for their massive earthworks throughout the regions of Lake Erie and Lake Huron. Heckewelder continues, they are said to have been remarkably tall and stout, and there is a tradition that there were giants among them, people of a much larger size than the Lenape. It is related that they had built regular fortifications or entrenchments. I have seen many of the fortifications said to be built by them, two of which in particular were remarkable. One of them was near the mouth of the river Huron, which empties itself into the Lake St. Clair on the north side of the lake at a distance about 20 miles northeast of Detroit. The other works, properly entrenchments, being walls or banks of earth regularly thrown up with a deep ditch on the outside, were on the Huron River east of Sandusky, about 6 or 8 miles from Lake Erie. Okay, we got an image here, another drawing. Very well dressed. That's a very well dressed Indian, all right? You peep everything, right? You see the building, the old world building, they had it. 1700s, huh? Oh, I thought they built them in the 1800s. Huh. That's what they're telling us, right? That was supposed to be Teduishong. Teduiskong was known as King of the Delawares. Outside of the gateways of these entrenchments were a number of large flat mounds, in which the Indian pilots said were buried hundreds of slain Aligawi. When the Lenape arrived on the banks of the Mississippi, they sent a message to the Aligawi to request permission to settle themselves in their neighborhood. This was refused them, but they obtained leave to pass through the country and seek settlement further to the eastward. They accordingly began to cross, when the Aligawi, seeing that their numbers were so very great, and in fact they consisted of many thousands, made a furious attack on those who had crossed, threatening them all with destruction if they dared to persist in coming over to their side of the river. Fired at the treachery of these people and the great loss of men they sustained, the Lenape consulted on what was to be done, whether to retreat in the best manner they could, or try their strength, and let the enemy see they were not cowards, but men, and too minded to suffer themselves to be driven off before they had made a trial of their strength, and were convinced that the enemy was too powerful for them. Okay? The Mangwe joined in the war. When the Mangwe, or Iroquois Indians, saw that the Lenny Lenapi were losing the battle, they agreed to fight on their side in exchange for a promise that they would have a part in jointly ruling the conquered lands east of the Mississippi. Conquerors, the Aligawi, were finally defeated, and it was said that they fled south down the Mississippi River, never to be seen again. Dodge the hijack. Again, Heckewelder continues. All right, and here's a drawing again. Drones. Giants. The Mengwe, who hitherto had been satisfied with being spectators from a distance, offered to join them on the condition that, after conquering the country, they should be entitled to share it with them, all right? The spoils of conquest, right? Who are they going to go conquer these lands from? Who's already in the East Coast? Something they leave out a lot, huh? Remember, these people coming from the West. Their proposal was accepted, and the resolution was taken by the two nations to conquer or die. Having thus united forces, the Lenape and Mengwe, remember Iroquois, declared war against the Aligawi, and great battles were fought in which many warriors fell on both sides. The enemy fortified their large towns and erected fortifications, especially on large rivers and near lakes, where they were successfully attacked and sometimes stormed by the Allies. An engagement took place in which hundreds fell, who were afterwards buried in holes or laid together in heaps and covered over with earth. No quarter was given, so that the Aligawi, at last finding that their destruction was inevitable if they persisted in their obstinacy, abandoned the country to the conquerors and fled down the Mississippi River, from whence they never returned. All right, and right here it says Pigeon Creek Valley, Pennsylvania, Charlie Roy Mail, May 7th, 1953. All right, and welcome to everybody. Thanks to all the supporters and all the familiar names. Thanks for being here. It says here the name Monongahela derives from the Indian River title, it being the name by which the Indian described the fallen banks of the river as soil erosion loosened the earth on its sides and caused it to slip into the stream. The other two bodies of water also derive their name from the Indian Mingo Creek and the entire Mingo section in Pigeon Creek. The Mingos, with Chickamingo as their chief, inhabited the section to the north of what is now Monongahela, while Pigeon was the chief of the great tribe which occupied for many seasons the waters of what is now called Pigeon Creek. Earlier, Indians in this section of the country were mound builders, evidences of such still being apparent from the surface in several places. The mounds embracing the section surrounding Decker Street and the old Crawl greenhouse property took its name from the huge mound at the southern end of Decker Street. Mounds also have been discovered on the Van Voorhis farm and at a site near El Rama. The El Rama mounds revealed 45 skeletons, giving proof that the mound builders lived here 10,000 years ago. Okay? The late George S. Fisher, Finleyville archaeologist, made excavations at the site and reported that the largest skeleton was 7 feet 5 inches in length. All right, here we go again. 6 foot, 7 foot giants. Are these really, I mean, today, we got a lot of 7 footers today, right? So just picture a whole town, a whole uh, civilization of 7 footers. Okay. The bones unearthed in pieces were put together and sent to the museum at Harrisburg, at a distance of 29 feet behind the mound. Another terrace was apparently a place of sacrifice to the deity. Here were found beads, knives, bear tusks, arrow points, and clay ovens. Fisher, during his years as an Indian authority, excavated more than 1,000 skeletons, claims this 1953 article in the local Pennsylvania newspaper. There were more than 100 campsites marked in the immediate district, and a number were not just listed. Talking about burials here. Giants. Giant skeleton found in Petersburg, Kentucky. Daily Northwestern, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, July 8, 1886. At Petersburg, Kentucky, 25 miles below here, an excavation for a new building has brought to light a peculiar find, it being a strange-looking Indian grave, the receptacle of which has been made of stone and clay, formed into a kind of cement, about 3 feet in height and fully 9 feet in length. Within the rude vault lay a giant human skeleton that measured 7 feet, 2 inches in length. The bones were all of large proportions, and the monstrous skull with teeth perfect, again, perfect teeth intact, was more than a half an inch thick at the base. A number of copper pieces, evidently worn for ornaments, a stone pipe, and a quantity of arrowheads were found with the decaying bones. Amazing finds from early American history. In the diary entry below, written in 1792, General John Payne reports uncovering an ancient burial ground along the banks of the Ohio River in Kentucky. A total of 110 skeletons were removed, the tallest measuring in all 7 feet tall. Diary of General John Payne, 1792, from the Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee by Dr. John Haywood. The bottom of which Augusta is situated is a large burying ground of the ancients. They have been found in great numbers and of all sizes, okay? All sizes. From the cellar under my dwelling, over 110 skeletons were taken. I measured them by skulls, and there might have been more whose skulls had crumbled into dust. The skeletons were in all sizes from 7 feet to infant. Dave Kilgore, who was a tall and very large man, passed our village at the time. I was excavating my cellar, and we took him down and applied a thigh bone to his. The man, if well proportioned, must have been 10 to 12 inches taller than Kilgore. The lower jawbone would slip over his skin and all. A survey of archaeological activity in Tennessee, 1835. In the country of Williamson, on the north side of Little Harpeth, in the lands owned by Captain Stockett, northwardly from Franklin, are walls of dirt running north from the river and east and west. In 1821, they were 4 or 5 feet high, and in length from the river between 490 and 300 yards. There is a ditch on the outside all around, 4 or 5 feet in width, partly filled up upon the soil, which has partly filled it up, are black oaks 2 feet or more in diameter. A spring of excellent water is in the middle of the enclosure, and a branch runs from it into the river through the interval left by the wall of its passage. The enclosure contains 40 or 30 acres. 3 mounds are in the inside, standing in a row north to south, and near the wall and ditch on the north side of the area. All these mounds are of nearly the same size. Within the enclosure are a vast amount of graves, all of them enclosed within rocks, and the bones are very large. James McLaughlin, who was 7 feet high, applied one of the thigh bones found there to his thigh, and it was 3 or 4 inches longer than his thigh. All right. So again, consistency, right? Pretty big, large bones being found. Says here, Ohio State gets in the act. The tight-lipped account below concerns a giant skull found by a museum curator from Ohio State University. This burial is interesting in that it combines several of the burial motives previously discussed. First of all, the skeleton was found inside a log hut buried in the mound. Second, the skeleton's arms and legs were wrapped in half-inch thick bracelets. Third, the skeleton itself was 7 feet tall and with a skull 25 inches in circumference. Okay? Hut and skeleton found in Big Mound near Chillicothe, Ohio Daily Gazette, May 25th, 1897. Clarence Loveberry, curator of the Museum of Ohio State University, has made remarkable discoveries in a large Indian mound. He is excavating just outside the city limits. Several days ago, he found a well-preserved log hut in the interior of the mound, and yesterday he found a skeleton of the occupant of the log hut. The skeleton's wrists were wrapped with copper cerements, indicating it to be that of a distinguished person. The skull was at least half an inch in thickness. All right. So before we continue in this book, since we're talking about Ohio, I wanted to keep going back and forth. All right. We're going to get into this book right here. It's called The Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America by Fritz Zimmerman, forward by L.A. Marsuli. We've actually read the first, I believe, 2 parts of this book. We're going to go to part 3 today. It says here, the giants of the Ohio Valley. And yeah, this is actually an image of rock I guess they found here. He uses this for a cover of another book he has, which we're reading too. It says this sculpture head weighing over 50 pounds was found on an eastern Kentucky hilltop after surface mining had exposed it. The find was close to a cave burial that contained numerous skeletons. A source said that all of the men who were engaged in the looting of the cave soon died sudden, mysterious deaths. The man who discovered this head refused to be part of the grave robbing, but was visited by numerous entities after bringing this sculpture home. The ancient sculpture is now owned by Ken Kristen from Missouri, who has reported no paranormal activity since his acquisition of the ancient work. All right, they got rid of the competition maybe. All right, so it says here, New York and Pennsylvania are included in this section because the Indians, including the Lenny Lenapi and Iroquois, consider the Allegheny and Ohio rivers as the same. Burial mound types in New York and Pennsylvania are consistent with those in the Ohio Valley. It says here, New York, Cattaraugus County. There's a burial mound here in this county. There's history of Cattaraugus County, New York, 1879. About 2 miles south of the village of Rutledge, in the town of Conewango, on lot number 45, at a point about 60 rods east of Conewango Creek and near the residence of Norman E. Cohen, it was discovered by the first pioneers of this section a sepulchre mound, nearly circular in form and having an entire circumference of 170 feet. The height of the mound was about 12 feet. Mr. Cheney spoke of this work as having the appearance of being constructed with the ditch outside of the mound as in Druid barrows. Within the mound there were discovered 9 human skeletons, which had been buried in a sitting posture and at regular intervals of space in the form of a circle and facing toward a common center. There was some slight appearance that the framework had enclosed the dead at the time of their interment. The skeletons were so far decayed as to crumble upon exposure to the atmosphere, but were all of very large size. An osmifer an os femur. The largest found here was 28 inches in length. History of Cattaraugus County, New York, 1879. On examination, writes Mr. Alder, they proved to be skeletons entire, having been deposited there 3 or 4 feet in depth. A remarkable characteristic of these skeletons was their enormous proportions. Compared with my own stature and physical formation, they must have been giants indeed. All right, and maybe that's like an example they did, right? The statue, so they can show the height of the skeletons they're finding. All right, guys, you see a comparison, right? In 1876, a young man accompanied several of his neighbors who excavated a burial mound. What he witnessed would inspire him 62 years later to carve a replica of the remarkable find, all right? So that's the replica right here. Mr. Huntington's motivation was to recreate exactly what he had witnessed many years ago, using the measurements taken by Mr. Cheney, who was present at the dig. The model was built life-size, according to the measurements taken by Mr. Huntington when a mound on the Conewango Road was opened. In the background is Untold Ages. A giant 9-foot man has been modeled in wood by Charles Huntington of East Randolph. The model is based upon an image which has been formed in Mr. Huntington's mind since the day 62 years ago when he witnessed the exhumation of the skeletons of prehistoric mound builders at the N.E.G. Cowan Farm on the Conewango Road. Measurements which he secured at that time formed the basis upon which the model was constructed. The full length model was preceded by 3 bust-length models, 2 of them being reproductions based upon skeletons of a man and a woman found at Moundsville, West Virginia, and the third based upon the skeletons found at the Cowan Farm. When several of the persons who saw these earlier figures expressed disbelief that such large human beings had ever roamed the woods and fields of this vicinity, Mr. Huntington wrote to Albany for verification. He received a letter from C.A. Hartnagel, Assistant State Geologist, giving figures reported by T. Apollyon Cheney, a Randolph man, who was present at the time the mound was opened. Mr. Cheney figures checked with those which Mr. Huntington had used. As an example of the remarkable size of the skeletons, the measurements of the os femur, or bone between the ankle and knee, was 28 inches in length. Facial angle of 73 degrees, and the high forehead would indicate a large degree of intelligence. All right, very intelligent, tall man, mound builder, creating the Grave Creek stone inscription. All right. Wow, I hope you're enjoying it. It says here, Daily Gazette from Fort Wayne, Indiana, May 1st, 1885. The Mound Builders. Many evidences of a first race in and about Randolph. Between Lake Erie and Dayton, Chautauqua County, are the remains of a circular sepulchre mound. The mound has an elevation of 80 feet and is 120 feet in circumference. According to antiquaries, this mound must have been the mausoleum of some great warrior. In the towns of Lear and Conewago, excavations were made some years ago in several of these mounds. In one of them, 8 skeletons were found. They were in a sitting posture, arranged in a circle. Large blocks of mica were found in some of the mounds among the skeletons. This material is so frequently found in these burial mounds that it is believed to have been regarded as a sacred relic by the extinct race whose work still remains in the most gigantic earthworks all over the continent. All over the continent. New York Serpent Mound. Near the station of the New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio Railroad is a peculiar earth formation, which was designed by those who fashioned it thousands of years ago to represent a serpent. According to the conclusion of those who have read the customs of the mound builders by the monuments they left, this peculiar formation is 425 feet long, and enthusiastic antiquarians who visit are unanimous in the resemblance it represents to a snake basking in the sunshine. All right, I have a whole other take on it, but it does represent what is that snake? Is it a snake or is it the sperm going into the egg? All right, so we've talked about it, shown the image. We might do it later. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Where conception, the act of conception. The Smithsonian Institution Bureau of Ethnology, 1898, 1899, New York. An exceptional example of the burial mound was described by Mr. T.H. Cheney. It was in Conewango Township, Cattaraugus County, on the brow of a hill. The account is not perfectly clear, but is here given Mr. Cheney's own words. The form of the tumulus is of intermediate character between the ellipse and the parallelogram. The interior mound at its base has a major axis of 65 feet, while the minor axis is 61 feet, with an altitude above the first platform, or embankment, of 10 feet, or an entire elevation of 13 feet. This embankment, with entrance or gateway upon the east side 30 feet in width, has an entire circumference of 170 feet. In making an excavation, 8 skeletons buried in a sitting posture and at regular intervals of space so as to form a circle within the mound were disinterred. Some slight appearance yet existed to show that framework had enclosed the dead at the time of interment. These osteological remains were of very large size, but were much decomposed that they mostly crumbled to dust. Mostly crumbled to dust. Portsville Review, July 7th, 1949. 9-foot human giant removed from burial mound. In 1876, there was exhumed another of these giants in the Conewango Valley at Cohen's Corners, about 5 miles from East Randolph, New York. This giant Indian stood 9 feet in height, had a shin bone 28 inches in length, a foot 14 inches long, and measured 35 inches across his shoulders. These measurements are on record at Buffalo and Washington, D.C. This man was buried in a mound, as was the one at Oswego, which indicates they may have been related to the mound builders. Cayuga County, Weekly News and Democrat, Auburn, New York, May 30th, 1878. Giant skeleton. John White was excavating with a party in Scipio on Tuesday, exhumed the bones of 2 Indians. The location of the find is on the farm of E.P. Hoskins, Indian Fields Road. The skeletons, when first discovered, were entire and in sitting position. Much care was taken in digging around them to preserve them intact, but they fell apart in the removal. One of the skeletons was that of a giant, measuring 3 feet across the hips and 8 feet in stature. Its lower jaw was of immense proportions and would easily span the head of any of the party engaged in the discovery. A number of trinkets usually accompanying the Indian remains were found in the bones. The Catholic Church in the Niagara Peninsula, 1626-1895. The ancient works at Fawn Hill in western New York, discovered 40 years ago, showing knowledge of defense upon the part of the builders, surpassing that possessed by the American Indian, thus the hijack. The skeletons found within the fortified enclosure were those of a race of men one-third larger than the Iroquois or Huron. The giant forest trees that grew upon these works were over 500 years old, and there were traces that another growth existed before them, just like we read the other day, right? Growing on these temples, trees, right? On top of trees. A whole other cycle be right before the trees that were already growing. So even older, the Chautauqua County, or Chautauqua. Pittsburgh Dispatch, August 27th, 1891. Two human skeletons of giant size were unearthed at Lakewood, New York, by workmen. The thigh bone of one was 30 inches long. Shenango County. History of Shenango and Madison Counties, New York, 1880. The face of the earth around has indeed indicated that it has once been peopled with a race considerably advanced in civilization. Within a radius of 3 miles from this spot are found the graves. With trees growing over them, so that the roots spread from the head to the foot. A great many of these graves have been some years since excavated and found to contain various bones, and in some cases entire skeletons of people of giant proportions, the skulls and jawbones of which would cover the head and face of the most fleshy person of our day. And these graves were also found hatchets of very symmetrical shape, brass kettles, somewhat in the form of our brass kettles, smoking pipes of various shapes, small metal bells, beads of all shapes and sizes, and various other articles of use and ornament, some of them bearing letters, characters, or devices in an unknown language, in an unknown script. All right. Now we're gonna go back. We're gonna come back to this book. I just want you guys to see there's so many. All right, we're going back to the book. This is again the ancient giants who ruled America. So we read this one. Okay. 7-footer found in Salem, Ohio. Hammond Times, Friday, June 30th, 1939. Discovery of an ancient skeletons and priceless relics in an Indian mound in North Benton, northwest of Salem, by two Alliance, Ohio mail carriers has brought hundreds of visitors to the scene and attracted the attention of expert archaeologists. The two amateur archaeologists, Roy Salzman and Willis McGrath, made the excavation on the farm of John Malsbury. After examining the mound, Richard G. Morgan, state archaeologist, declared that the work of the two Alliance men was the most important archaeological discovery in this section of the state in recent years. He estimated the age of the findings at more than 2,000 years old. One skeleton uncovered was that of a man, apparently a chief, estimated to have been 7 feet tall. Hold on. Whose skull was 25 inches in circumference. Other findings included flint arrows, the stones of 3 sacrificial altars, spearheads, flake knives, and beautifully wrought objects of copper. Mass giant burial evidence of bloody battle. This is one of many accounts that report a giant's jaw was big enough to fit over that of a normal man. In this case, the burial field was thought to contain between 2,000 and 3,000 skeletons. All right, 2,000 to 3,000 skeletons. History of Ashtabula County, 1800. The graves were distinguished by slight depressions in the surface of the earth deposited in straight rows. The number of these graves has been estimated to be between 2,000 and 3,000. Aaron Wright made a careful examination of these depressions and found them invariably to contain human bones, blackened with time, which upon exposure to the air quickly crumbled to dust. Some of these bones were of unusual size and evidently belonged to a race aligned with giants. Skulls were taken from these mounds, of which were of sufficient capacity to admit the skull of a normal man, and jawbones that may be fitted over the face with equal facility. The bones of the upper and lower extremities were of corresponding size. Copper helmeted giants rule. There have been a number of intriguing finds in Indiana over the years. The following article describes how an Indiana farmer fought eight skeletons, one, found eight skeletons and one clad in copper armor, buried together in a circle. Indiana's 8-foot giants were copper armor, okay? Copper armor. Oakland Tribune, January 3rd, 1926. Another discovery was made of 8 skeletons, one clad in copper armor, buried in a perfect circle, made when the Logan Grays, a military group led by A.M. Jones, were conducting military exercises in 1888 on a small island on Eagle Lake near Warsaw, Indiana. Under the flat stone, they discovered a hole that led to the entrance to a secret cave with the skeleton of a 6'9" giant buried next to a stream that led to what was called a sacred pool. It is interesting to note that the dimensions of this secret room are almost identical to one described in Tennessee. Example, 25 feet long by 15 feet wide by 8 feet deep, branching out at the middle to form 2 rooms. Indiana giants found bones of an Indian giant, Cincinnati Commercial, October 7th, 1888. A member of the Logan Grays, the crack military organization of Logan Sport that held his encampment this year at Eagle Lake near Warsaw, stopped in the city on his way home from camp and told the following story of the discovery by the party of a cavern on an island in Eagle Lake. A.M. Jones rode to a small island near the southwest corner of the lake and began digging for worms. He turned over a large flat stone near a tree, and under it was a small hole, which was an entrance to a cave. Jones called the boys up. We began an exploration of the cavern, which proved to be 75 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 8 feet deep. The walls are of a natural formation of stone, branching out at the middle so as to form 2 rooms. In the front room was the skeleton of a man 6 feet 9 inches long. The bones were very large, indicating great strength. Along one side of the cave runs a small stream of water, as pure as crystal. In the front of it forms a small pool. In this were a number of bones. All settlers in this vicinity of the lake claim that the skeleton is that of Eagle Unki, the giant Indian chief who lived alone on this island and mysteriously disappeared during a severe winter. The island was named after this chief and was once known as Giant Island. Okay, Eagle Unki. Excavations at Illinois sites in 1891. From 1891, we find this news report on skeletons found in the aptly named city of Carthage, Illinois. Perfect giant skeleton found. Hawkeye, Burlington, Iowa, September 1st, 1891. No little excitement has been occasioned by the discovery on a farm near Carthage of several skeletons in a mound that are doubtless those of prehistoric people. In regard to this historic find, the Carthage Republican newspaper will publish the following. The Sweeney Farm Mounds, located near the south line of the farm quarter on Section 5, Carthage Township, have been a familiar landmark to the oldest citizens since, and the quarter was entered by Samuels in 1836 or thereabouts. Last Saturday afternoon, the new owner of the Sweeney Farm Indian Mounds was plowing on one of his mounds when he hit a series of sandstone blocks. On the removal of several sandstones, rocks embedded in the ground, the owner, Mr. Felt, procured a spade and proceeded to dig out the rocks with some difficulty. On the removal of these rocks, there was revealed an almost perfect skeleton of a man of very large size. The authorities of Carthage College have secured permission to investigate the find to its fullest extent, and Reverend Dr. Stephen D. Peet has been notified. Chicago Tribune, 1892, confirms race of giants. This definite report states that the entire country lying between the Illinois and Mississippi rivers between Galena and Cairo is honeycombed with Indian mounds. Okay? Indian mounds. Hundreds of burials. Chicago Tribune, 1892. Near Carthage, Illinois, about 1 year ago, a mound was plowed up and the bones, principally the skull of human beings, were found in sufficient quantities to warrant the conclusion that hundreds of people had been buried there. From measurements taken of some of the skulls and principal bones, it was decided that the persons buried were of a race of giants. Some of the femur bones measured 19 and 1/4 inches, and the measurements of the skulls and other bones indicated that these people must have attained an average of 7 to 8 feet in height. The entire country lying between the Illinois and Mississippi rivers, between Galena and Cairo, is honeycombed with Indian mounds, and mounds that are believed to be the handiwork of a prehistoric race. Nassau County, especially in localities bordering the Mississippi River, is covered with evidences of Indian burials, and their mounds are very numerous. Some interesting discoveries have been made. Some of the best descriptions of the finds of the mound builders are to be found in the County and State Historical Society reports. This one from 1902 reports the discovery of fields of mounds along the Lake Michigan, as well as along related rivers, creeks, and lakes within the skeletons, with, with the skeletons of giants, okay, uncovered, measuring between 7 and 8 feet in height. Yeah, wow. I hope you guys enjoying. You know, I'm gonna read a little bit more here before we go to the other book again. It says here the history of Lake County, Illinois, 1902. These mounds were quite numerous along the rivers and in the vicinity of the inland lakes. That they were of great antiquity is evident from the fact that huge trees had come to maturity upon their summits and were awaiting the axe of the pioneer. Excavations of these piles of earth have revealed the crumbling bones of a mighty race. Samuel Miller, who has resided in this county since 1835, is authority for the statement that one skeleton which he assisted in unearthing was a trifle more than 8 feet in length, and the skull being correspondingly large, while many other skeletons measured at least 7 feet. There were extensive burial grounds on the shore of Lake Michigan, mainly south of the Waukegan River, also at various points all through the country. Many of the skeletons found near the lake were of an unusual large size. All right, again, just reading these reports to you guys so you guys can see how numerous it was. It's just not here and there. They're not kidding when he's saying this in this chapter, land of the giants. What's a giant to you when we're talking about 7 to 8 foot uh, footers, right? The largest Neolithic burial site in the world, the Dixon Mounds Museum, Illinois. In 1930, newspapers across the country ran half-page photos of more than 50 skeletons laid out on various dirt platforms in the middle of a large archaeological dig, led by the University of Chicago. It was a truly riveting photo and was used in many year-end features as one of the top stories and photographs of the entire year. 83 years later, in a museum at the site, there is no mention of what was then called the largest Neolithic burial site ever discovered in the world. The story of Don Dixon and his mounds could serve as a microscopic primer for many of the stories pertaining to the recovery of ancient bones and the true history of America. All right? True history of America. In this case, the political correctness fallout that resulted in the American Indigenous Graves Protection and this is a company. Native American Graves Protection and Reparation Act. All right, that's an act. Laws once again being misapplied eventually led to a once thriving tourist destination being shut down and the skeletons it exhibited being buried by a local Indian tribe who had no genetic relation to the skeletons they claimed to protect. Uh-oh. No, nothing to see here. To give a little background, Don Dixon, a chiropractor from Lewiston, Illinois, grew up on a farm about 90 miles south of Peoria. that was intersected by the Illinois River. In 1927, Dixon was plowing on a hill near the river, and he broke through a layer of clay and gravel that he immediately recognized as an ancient Indian burial. Dixon then spent the next 2 years excavating the site, most famously with the help of the University of Chicago in 1929 and 1930. What they found, how they left, it became a national news story. Okay, sorry. What they found and how they left, it became a national news story. In short, instead of removing 248 skeletons, they exposed them to the air by removing all the dirt surrounding them and leaving them in situ to be photographed and visited, like some colossal ancient boneyard sideshow. All right, you guys hear that? In all, it was estimated that the site contained well over 3,000 burials, and the University of Chicago was calling it the largest Neolithic burial site in the world. All right, in the world, not just in America. You guys see, America, the true old world, they've been hiding all this. The largest Neolithic burial site in the world. Of course, they ain't going to show the bones. Mound builder tombs, huh? Wow. In the early 1930s, Dixon constructed a building to house the exposed skeleton field and opened the site to tourists. In the first year, he had 40,000 visitors, and the whole venture became a national tourist destination. Hey, Mom, I want to go see the Giants. Can you take me go see the Giants? Sure, son. We'll drive there this weekend. Go see some Giants for the weekend. How about that, son? I love you, Dad. Hey, much love and respect, Tales of the Chrysalis. Thank you. Thank you. So, big business, right? Big business, big tourist destination. As people love being able to see these large skeletons displayed in situ, though in all probability not in their original and far more bizarre burial positions. Dixon successfully ran the tourist operation until 1945, when he sold the mounds to the state of Illinois, who made the site part of their state museum system in 1965. The Dixon Mounds averaged about 75,000 visitors a year, who were exposed not only to the skeletons, but also to a history lesson on the mound builders and their extremely ancient history in the area. All of that came to an acrimonious and beginning, I'm sorry, and beginning in 1990, when Native Americans began to petition and protest that the site be shut down and sealed, and that the skeletons should be reburied under NAGPRA, which was then brand new. The NAGPRA laws mandated that all Indian relics and skeletons be returned to their rightful tribal owners. After several years of battle in court revolving around ownership issues pertaining to the lack of genetic associations of the skeletons to the current local tribes, among other controversial subjects, all right, they're not related to the same people. They're saying that's our bones, that's our ancestors, they're like, so that's the controversial part. So are they really using all this to hide the bones? Like an excuse, hey, we're protecting them. It's not even these people's bones. That's not their ancestors. With all respect. They know it. They did the test. That's why I'm not saying it. They're telling you right here. It's a controversial subject. The Indians won out, and the Mounds exhibit was shut down and sealed in 1992. The site remained closed for the next 2 years as the tribes involved reburied an undisclosed number of skeletons found at the site, which ultimately is known to have contained more than 3,000 burials. When the renovated museum reopened 2 years later, without the open boneyard exhibit, interest in the site as a tourist attraction immediately disappeared. And although the site remains open to this day, it generates very little interest from the public in regard to its new cleaned up, skeleton free existence. Okay? Smithsonian involvement in the disappearance of giant skeletons found in Wisconsin Indian mounds. It is hard to imagine today, but the historical record is filled with vivid descriptions of how Wisconsin and Minnesota were like the Nazca lines of burial mounds. So it comes as no surprise that giants have been turning up there for a long time. This case covers the involvement of the Smithsonian at a Wisconsin site in the 1880s and a collection of ancient skeletons of giants called the Stoddard collection. All right, we're going to definitely look into this. So it is of particular interest to our study of that museum's long-standing policy of burying the evidence when it comes to proof of ancient giants ruling America in extreme antiquity. Okay? 50 skeletons unearthed remains of giant aborigines discovered. Giant aborigines. LA Cross Tribune or La Crosse Tribune, November 4th, 1912. More than 50 skeletons of the ancient mound builders were unearthed Saturday from 5 mounds in the town of Stoddard by a party of normal students and professors who made a special trip to investigate them. Valuable relics were also recovered that will be on exhibition at the Normal Museum. The country around La Crosse has long been known as the center of Indian activities in centuries. Sorry, guys. That's what happened. We live, man. We're getting messages and everything. All right, here we go. Where were we? Let me see. Sorry. So many mounds in the vicinity. Okay, about 30 years ago, agents of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., investigated several mounds in what is now the town of Stoddard. They unearthed much valuable material in the line of skeletons, arrowheads, and spearheads from the first few of a chain of a dozen mounds. And at the present time, there is in Washington a Stoddard collection of Indian relics. They have the collection probably sealed up in their basement. Since that time, Smithsonian officials have often considered opening more of the mounds, but nothing has been done. Spurred on by the generous offer of A. White, who owns the ground on which are located 5 large mounds, to donate the contents to the Normal School Museum. Apparently, no help from the Smithsonian officials. The Normal authorities recently took the matter up, and several local citizens generously provided a fund for the expenses of an expedition to unearth the contents. 6 foot, 6 inch skeleton unearthed. All right. Hey, I know a couple people that hide. Professor A.H. Sanford and W.H. Thompson of the University of Wisconsin Department of History and L.P. Denayer of the Geology Department, together with a company of 13 students, left on Saturday morning with shovels to examine the ancient graves. Professor Austin and some of his students surveyed and made a counter map of the field determining the dimensions of the mounds and the lay of the surrounding country. The expedition was of a scientific character, and the results of the investigations will appear in printed form. A large mound in the center, probably the grave of an Indian chief, was adjoined by 2 smaller ones on each side. The latter were investigated first, and the efforts of the diggers were rewarded at once by the unearthing of a skeleton about 5 feet down, which measured 6.5 feet in length. The skull was very large, being 8 inches in diameter from ear to ear. The teeth were well preserved, but the other bones quickly fell to pieces. The first mound yielded 11 skeletons. The second contained only charcoal and burned bones, indicating cremation. Efforts yield many skeletons and artifacts. The middle mound, which was the largest, required much effort to excavate. More than 20 skeletons were found besides the bowl of a clay peace pipe, all right, a copper arrowhead, copper skinning knife, a sandstone spearhead, and several flint arrowheads. The fourth eminence yielded over 25 skeletons, pieces of clay pottery, and a bear's tooth. The last mound, after digging about 6 feet down, brought up a large spear point of quartz with a red coloring design on each side. Adjoining the white farm is properly owned by Homer Hart of La Crosse, on which are located several more mounds. All right. We're going to go back to this book, guys. Remember, we're reading this book too. And this is the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America by Fritz Zimmerman. This here is Shenango County. Oh no, okay, we were already there at that. So Essex County. Whoops, sorry. Towanda, New York. Daily Review, April 19th, 1916. The grave of a human giant. Visitors go up on Pisgah almost every pleasant day. Mount Pisgah, hello. Mrs. Atwater, who is still making some improvements, is still there, and Mr. Vontrell of Mansfield is there and drives the team down occasionally for visitors. The Athens Historical Society sent word to the mountain that they would visit it next Saturday. They claimed to know of an Indian grave on top that they would open. The only Indian grave we ever know of there, says the Troy Gazette, was on the south point of the mountain on the farm of Charles W. Hooker. A very large thigh bone of a human being was dug up 45 years ago at the point near the spring. It was of immense size, and on its being shown to Dr. Theodore Wilder, he said it must have belonged to a man 7 feet high. There were giants in those days. Livingston County, History of Livingston County, New York, 1881. When Jesse Stanley came to the Mount Morris in 1811, an Indian mound nearly 100 feet in diameter and from 8 to 10 feet high covered the site of the late General Mills' residence. The mound had long been crowned by a great tree, which had recently fallen under the axe, the stump remaining, though much weather beaten. Deacon Stanley was told that when freshly cut it disclosed 130 concentric circles or yearly growths. About the year 1820, the mound was removed, and in its removal, arrowheads, a brass kettle, and knives were thrown out. A number of skeletons were also disinterred. Among the bones was a human skeleton of enormous size, the jawbone of which was so large that Adam Holtzlander placed it mask-like over his own chin and jaw. Although he was the largest man in the settlement, and his face was in proportion to the rest of his body, metal, in the form of rude metals of pipe and other articles, were picked out of the earth thrown from the excavation. Seneca County, Antiquities of the State of New York, 1851. A few paces to the northward of the old fort is a low mound with a broad base, and undoubtedly of artificial origin. It is now about 6 feet high, and it is covered with depressions marking the graves of the dead. There is a tradition current among the Indians concerning this mound, to the effect that here in the olden time was slain a powerful giant, above whom the earth was afterward heaped. They believe that the bones of this giant may be found at the base. It would be interesting for a variety of reasons to have this mound excavated by whatever people erected it. It is certain that it was extensively used by the Senecas for purposes of burial. History of Seneca County, New York, 1876. There were several mounds on the Culver Place, and we often plowed up bones and ancient crockery. In 1850, we opened one of these mounds and found a very large skeleton with a well-shaped skull and a stone pitcher near the head. The pitcher seemed to have been made of sand and clay. Small vessels of the same material filled with clam shells were placed inside of the elbows. Some of these pitchers would hold half a gallon. We gave them to General Brish. These things were as wonderful to the Indians as to us. Suffolk County, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle Almanac, 1892. The Long Island Indians, Richard M. Bayliss. So much for the Indians as they were found by the white settlers or Europeans, but there are a few evidences that a different race of Indians had at some time occupied the soil. A remarkable discovery of Indian remains was made near Aqueboque in 1879. A great number of graves were found, the bones within them being so far decayed as to fall to the dust almost as soon as they were exposed to the air. The geological changes that have taken place since the graves were made suggest that perhaps thousands of years have passed since that time. The remains exhumed show a singular phenomenon in the construction of the jaws and teeth, there being no molars or grinding teeth. and the existing teeth being fitted with interlocking points, which would give the jaws the fierce character of an alligator or shark. The fragments of skeleton indicated powerful race. The remains of a temple or structure of some kind, unlike anything associated with historic Indians, was also found. It had clay walls and was 9 by 10 feet in size, with a dividing wall down the middle. It was found beneath 3 feet or more of solid soil. For what purpose it was constructed and who were the race of people associated with it remains a mystery. Okay? A mystery. Pennsylvania, Bradford County. History of Bradford County, Pennsylvania, 1878. In 1822, while digging a cellar on the farm of General McKean, the excavation came to what was supposed to be an impenetrable rock, but striking it with a crow, it gave forth a hollow sound. They redoubled their efforts, and at last the stone broke and fell into a vault. And now, with visions of a long buried treasure flitting through their minds, they carefully removed the earth from the arch, speculating the while as to the probable extent of the treasure trove and the amount of salvage the general would be likely to claim. On removing the cap, they found not what they sought, but a sepulchre. A careful examination of the sarcophagus revealed it flagged at the bottom, the sides artistically built up, and a flat stone laid on the top. The sarcophagus measured 9 feet in length, 2 feet 6 inches in width, and 2 feet deep. In it was found a skeleton measuring, as it lay, 8 feet 2 inches in length. This measurement was made by Dr. Williams, late of Troy, now deceased. The teeth were sound, but the bones were soft and easily broken. There were 2 of these sepulchres within the space of the cellars, one of which had a pine growing over it, 3 feet in diameter. Okay? 8 feet, people. Washington County. Jamestown Journal, April 8, 1859. 8-foot giant humans unearthed in Monongahela City, Pennsylvania. The skeleton of giant 8 feet high, of a giant 8 feet high, has been exhumed from the farm of Mr. Colvin near Monongahela City, Pennsylvania. The Pittsburgh Chronicle says, from the position of the bones in the vault under the stone, it is supposed the bodies were buried in a seated position, the skull bones and those of the trunk being all in a heap, while those of the legs were scattered along towards the foot of the vault. At the foot was also many of these graves were found various articles of ornaments of exquisite workmanship, denoting a greater skill than usually belonged to the Indians, together with crockery and warlike implements. The graves in the vicinity number several hundreds and go to show that the field was at one time an extensive burying ground. Lancaster Examiner and Herald, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, March 30th, 1859. Interesting discovery, the skeleton of a giant exhumed. On a farm of Mr. Colvin, 4 miles from Monongahela City, a large number of graves have been opened that do not resemble the Indian graves heretofore found in great numbers upon the Monongahela River and its tributaries. Mr. Colvin began plowing this spring upon the bottom land bordering on Pigeon Creek. The field was called the Fort Field on account of the great number of flint arrowheads, stone axes, piles of mussel shells, and other traces of an ancient encampment of the aborigines. The field had been plowed before, but not so deep. The attention of Mr. Colvin was attested at last by noticing that in one part of the field this plow would glide for several feet up over the flat stones lying horizontally over 6 or 8 inches below the surface. He examined one of them, and on taking it up, found human bones of vast size, some singular pottery, and shell ornaments of curious workmanship, supposed to have been worn in the ear. Beneath it, Dr. Keyes of Bentleyville and other anatomists, on measuring one of the thigh bones, pronounced the skeleton to have belonged to a human being who must have been at least 8 feet high. All right, 8 feet high. McKee's Rocks, it says here, burial mound, where large skeletons were unearthed, okay? They were burying all these Gigantic people, huh? Ancient Americans? Who are them? That's what we're digging on. We're gonna find out one day for sure. We almost there. Smithsonian Institution's burial, Bureau of Ethnology, 1898, 1899. On the upper terrace within the corporate limits of Monongahela City are situated the gardens and greenhouse of Mr. I.S. Kroll. Two ravines on the east and west sides open directly south into Pigeon Creek, and the erosion has lowered the ground until it is surrounded by higher land on every side except along the bluff next to the creek, the further side of the creek being bounded by a high hill, the pass looking up the river. Thus the track is surrounded on every side by hills close at hand, ranging from 40 to 250 feet above its level. And excavating for foundation walls and other purposes, Mr. Kroll has at different times unearthed skeletons of large size. The ground is strewn with mussel shells, flint chips, etc. On the eastern side of this levee, near the break of the ravine, and close to a never failing spring, stands the largest mound above the one at McKee's Rocks, measuring 9 feet in height by 60 feet in diameter, at the center of a hole measuring 3 feet across the top and 2 feet into the original soil. And these were fragments of human bones too soft to be preserved. They indicated an adult of large size. The gray clay was unbroken over this hole. Directly over this, above the clay and resting upon it, were portions of another large skeleton, with which was found part of an unburned clay tube or pipe. Pittsburgh Press, September 13th, 1932. Removal of Indian giants to Harrisburg stirs attack on foreign craze. Archaeological director believes hills nearby hold early man clue. 49 prehistoric residents who lived here 10,000 years ago were given their first auto ride today. These ancient Americans, men, women, and children discovered in a wooded hillside near Pittsburgh a month ago by G.S. Fisher, state archaeologist, are on their way to Harrisburg. Wrapped in a cheesecloth and tucked in cartons, the mound builders, more precisely their brittle brown bones, are riding across the state director of archaeological work. They left Fisher's workshop, where they have been quartered since they were unearthed September 12th, from a circular burial knoll bordering the Monongahela River in Washington County. One skeleton making the trip with Cut So, former Cambridge University and British Museum ethnologist and archaeologist, said the discovery and recent unearthing of a mound near Newcastle led him to believe that other traces of the mound's men will be found in this state. Rosicrucian Messenger of Constructive Philosophy, November 1932. Campers near El Rama, Pennsylvania, have dug up skeletons of human beings who lived in America thousands of years before the red men. 49 bodies were unearthed near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. One is of a giant nearly 8 feet tall. The bodies will be reassembled at Finleyville and delivered to the State Museum at Harrisburg. Some are to be sent to the Smithsonian Institution at Washington, D.C. Again, never to be seen. Westmoreland County. The Sun, December 8th, 1893. 9-foot mummy discovered in Pennsylvania burial mound. Dr. W. J. Holland, curator of the Carnegie Museum, Pittsburgh, and his assistant, Dr. Peterson, a few days ago opened up a mound of the ancient race that inhabited this section and secured the skeleton of a man who, when in the flesh, was between 8 and 9 feet in height, says a Greenberg dispatch to the Philadelphia Inquirer. This mound, which was originally about 100 feet long and more than 12 feet high, has been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.R. Sechrest farm in South Huntington Township. This farm has been in the Sechrest name for more than a century. The most interesting feature of the recent excavation was the mummified torso of the human body, which the experts figured was laid to rest at least 400 years ago. Portions of the bones dug up and the bones in the legs, Professor Peterson declares, are those of a person between 8 and 9 feet in height. So he's saying this person was alive 400 years ago. The scientists figured that this skeleton was the framework of a person of the prehistoric race that inhabited this section before the American Indians. The torso and the portions of the big skeleton were shipped to the Carnegie Museum. Doctors Holland and Peterson supervised the exploration of the secret mound with the greatest of care. The curators believed the man whose skeleton they secured belonged to the mound builders. Right? Belonged to the mound builders. We're going to go back to the book right here, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, The Missing Skeletons, and the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. Okay? It says giant Indian bones discovered of an extraordinary skeleton near Fond du Lac. Fond du Lac Banner, June 6, 1899. An Indian skeleton was dug up on the farm of Matt and Joseph Leon, 1 mile south of St. Cloud on Saturday. There was nothing strange in finding an Indian skeleton, but this one was a giant in size, his frame measuring 7 feet. He must have been a man of note among his people, for he was buried in a large mound. 16 handsome arrows surrounded his body. The skull was brought to this city and is on exhibition in one of the main street windows. The Winona, Minnesota, 10-foot giant. All right, a 10-foot giant. Yeah, Williams, you still here. That's right. Dodge the hijack when they say, because you know if they're talking about what they call today certain people who are known to have migrated later on. But yeah, you guys is definitely still here. The Winona, Minnesota 10-foot giant. The history of Winona County, 1883. Indian mounds and relics are found in various parts of this township. Not long since, while some men were digging in Mineral Bluff, some 150 feet above the river, a skeleton of unusual size was unearthed. On measuring, the skeleton was found to be 10 feet in length, all right, 10 feet with other parts in proper proportion. In the skull was found a copper hatchet and a dart or arrowhead 9 inches long. Another skeleton 9 feet long was found in the village of Dresbach, while some men were digging a road or trench. These skeletons were of an unusual size to those generally taken from Indian mounds. Their size, form, and structure would lead those well versed in paleontology to believe they belonged to a race prior to the Indian. In many mounds have also been found copper hatchets, chisels, and various kinds of tomahawks and other weapons of war. Also, these antique races seem to have had some process for hardening copper unknown to any modern process. All right, unknown to any modern process. Where they came from, when they lived, and from whence they have gone is only conjecture and speculation. If they don't know, they can't tell you then who it is then, all right? That they were mighty races, skilled in the mode of warfare, understanding the mechanical arts. For all these we have conclusive evidence, but of their final end we know nothing. Documented double-dentitions from Iowa. Throughout the Indian lore of giants are also stories of skulls being found with double rows of teeth, called double-dentitions. While there is often controversy regarding these claims, here's a modest and convincing story. Double-toothed giant. Journal Tribune, Williamsburg, Iowa, April 27, 1900. The discovery in Hardin County a short time ago by Joseph Buddha and Elliot Charles Gaines of innumerable mound builder relics and the subsequent finding by other parties of the remains of man of the prehistoric period have greatly interested scientists in other parts of the country, the chief among these being curator Charles Ulrich of the State Horticultural Society, assuring himself of the truthfulness of the various newspaper reports, Mr. Aldrich has arranged to be in Eldora next month and began a careful and systematic exploration of some of the mounds in the vicinity, the legal permission having been obtained. In a large show window in Eldora for several days has been exhibited the skeleton of the man, which was found in a mound on the banks of the Iowa River near Eagle City, 6 miles north. It has caused much interest and wonderment. Although well preserved, it is estimated that the skeleton is many centuries old. The skull is very large and thick, fully a quarter of an inch. A set of almost round double teeth are remarkably well preserved. They are yellow with age, are perfect in shape, and appear to have been double, both above and below. The femurs are very long, showing a giant in stature. Dr. N.C. Morse, a prominent physician who examined the skeleton, pronounced it that of a person who had evidently been trained for athletics, as the extremities were so well developed. You hear this, guys? Are we talking about one of those ancient sports players? The Buddha collection. Joseph Buddha, who has taken much interest in mound exploration, has a rare collection of implements of the Stone Age, all found near Eldora. Among these are pottery axes, arrows, beadwork, pestles, mallets, and although he has offers for the collection, will not part with it unless he may be induced by Curator Aldrich to loan the collection to the state to be placed in the historical buildings in Des Moines when completed. Giants of Middle America. Iowa giant, 7 feet, 6 inches. He says 6 inches, 6 inches. Oakland Tribune, December 20, 1925. All right. Second. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Out of a mound in Iowa was dug the skeleton of a giant who, judging from the measurement of his bones, must have stood 6 inches over 7 feet high when he was alive. In another, there was central chamber containing 11 skeletons arranged in a circle with their backs against the walls, in the midst of a huge seashell which had been converted into a drinking cup. Within the last few weeks, it has been reported from Missouri the discovery of the skeleton of a man who was trifle more than 7 feet 2 inches tall. Frank Plum, a student of archaeology who made the find, reported discovering inside the skull a pear-shaped stone such as the Mayas placed in the mouths of their dead. Okay? Just like the Mayas placed the mouth of their dead, he's saying. The article below, which appeared all over the Texas and the nation in 1931, omits all information about the size of the skeletons in an obvious effort to hide the skeleton's actual heights. It is standard practice for all archaeologists to give heights for any skeletons they discover. Indian graves are open in Texas. 25 human skeletons dug up and given to museums. Review Minor, June 19, 1931. Waco, Texas. 25 complete human frames, those of Indian braves and squaws, and their papooses with such of their possessions as have survived burial, have been unearthed near here, and today are in the museums of 3 Texas schools. Sorry, God. The 25 bodies were placed in the burial mounds, each facing east more than 100 years ago. They were discovered by Dr. K.D. Ainsworth, 30 miles west of here in Kurimeo County. The mound was explored by the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology of the University of Texas. The first of the 3 layers of bodies was only 21 inches below the surface, and the second layer was just below the first. The third tier was 36 inches deep. Beside the bodies of the women were the large rock bowls and the round-headed clubs they used to grind corn. Arrows and spearheads of flint were found near the bones of the men. One bone knife, 10 inches in length, its back notched, was found by the side of one brave. The bones are divided and given out. The bones were divided between the State University at Austin, Baylor Women's College at Belton, and Baylor University here, all right? They're like, hey, you guys can have the bones. One for you, one for you, one for you. I don't like you, not you. One for you, one for you. Okay. Smithsonian rushes to North Dakota to find. Why are they rushing over there? Smithsonian. Minnesota Evening Tribune, September 18, 1963. Associated Press, Catherine N.D. The remains of an Indian woman, judged by some to be at least 1,000 years old, have been unearthed from a burial mound on the Vincent Zacharias farm, 4 miles east of here. The skeleton was found about 2 feet below the surface. The body had been buried in a sitting position, and nearly all the skeletal bones were found intact. Two men from the Smithsonian Institution visited the farm recently and made an analysis of the skeleton. They estimated the remains were those of an Indian woman about 23 to 25 years of age, and that she had been buried about 1,000 years ago. Another dam destroys another ancient village. Uh-oh, another dam, huh? These damn dams. Ogden, Utah. This is from the Standard Examiner, August 7th, 1959. Evidences of a group of Utah natives who had no housing problems were uncovered by earth-moving machinery at the Willard Bay Dam this week. A bulldozer scraped off the top of an Indian mound in which artifacts and a human skeleton were found. Bureau of Reclamation men stopped work at this site and notified the University of Utah. James G. Gunderson of the Archaeology Department of the university visited the area Tuesday with Robert Robinson of 665 Polk, a field engineer with the Bureau. Mr. Gunderson said the remains were those of a group of Pueblo-type Indians who inhabited the area from AD 1000 to 1200. From the signs and artifacts, there had been a village of several dirt houses at the site, the Utah University man said. They were farmers. The Utah scientists said these people were farmers who raised corn, squash, and beans. They had a certain culture, he said, which was indicated by a piece of broken pottery with a decorative line around its rim. The skeleton was complete except for the skull. Mr. Robinson said that the scientists estimated the skeleton was that of an adult about 5 feet 10 inches in height, somewhat taller than average for this race of early Indians. All right, so I guess they consider these people tall. At an employee at the University of Utah yesterday quoted Dr. Gunderson as saying, the archaeology department has no plans for further exploration at the Willard Dam site. All right, we're going to go back to the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America. Okay, we're going back to that book. Daily Journal, December 2nd, 1920. Strange apparitions frighten farmers. Greenburgh, Pennsylvania, December 3rd. The famous mound builder Mound in the South Huntington Township has suddenly taken on life, and the 800-year-old, according to the best informed scientists laid down to their eternal sleep, have just as suddenly started stalking out at nights, disturbing the tranquility of the country neighborhood. All right, so now they're getting scared because now they were messing with the mound, not the mound's messing with them. So strong has become the belief that all is not well within the famous mound, which is 300 feet long and 12 feet high, that Dave Kelly, the High Constable and custodian of the peace in and about Gradstown, a mile from the mound, has been asked to investigate. First news of the stalking of the ghosts of the ancient mound builders, for that is what the night prowlers are believed to become on Halloween night. Because of the night, little attention was paid to the frightened traveler who rushed breathlessly into Gradstown with his announcement. But when on Armistice night by Cy Brown and Sue Smith happened to be passing there and saw the same 8-foot apparition, but with a slightly smaller specimen alongside, Cy simply stepped on the gas, for he owns an auto, and made haste for the Armistice Hall. Cy admits he wasn't scared, but those who that saw him start home with Sue that night claim he took a 5-mile detour to get home. The appearance of the ghost has caused some excitement, especially among the younger people. Some time ago, Dr. W.J. Holland and his assistant from the Carnegie Museum at Pittsburgh invaded the quietness of the mound builder's tomb and removed from it one of the 8-foot specimens. Whether this has angered the ancient denizens of the mound is a question the populace hereabouts is unable to determine so far. All right, so now you see, now we got a giant hunting these people. All right, 8-foot giant hunting these people. Oh, hold on, sorry. Okay, the Stansted Journal, February 3rd, 1921. Unearthed skeleton of giant. Bones of supposed mound builder. Those of a man 8 or 9 feet high. Okay, 8 or 9 feet high. Who's this mason right here? Dr. W. Holland, curator of the Carnegie Museum. Okay, that's him. Pittsburgh, and his assistant, Dr. Peterson, a few days ago opened up a mound of the ancient race that inhabited this section and secured the skeleton of a man who, when in the flesh, was between 8 and 9 feet in height, says a Greenburgh, Pennsylvania dispatch to the Philadelphia Inquirer. This mound, which was originally about 100 feet long and more than 12 feet high, has been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.R. Sechrest farm in South Huntington Township. This farm has been in the Sechrest name for more than a century. The most interesting feature in the recent excavation was the mummified torso of the human body, which experts figured was laid to rest at least 400 years ago. A portion of the bones dug up of the bones in the legs, Professor Peterson declares, are those of a person between 8 and 9 feet in height. The scientists figured that the skeletons was the framework of a person of the prehistoric race that inhabited this section before the American Indians. The torso of the portions of the big skeleton was shipped to the Carnegie Museum. Doctors Holland Peterson, Doctors Holland and Peterson supervised the exploration of the Sechrest Mound with the greatest of care. The curators believed the man whose skeleton they secured belonged to the mound builder class, okay? Just more and more and more giants. Ohio. All right. Many of the large burial mounds in Ohio held the skeletal remains of the giant humans. From the Nephilim Chronicles, the travel guide to the ancient ruins in the Ohio Valley. All right, that's one of his other books in Athens County. Whoops. It says Evening Bulletin, March 21st, 1882. Prehistoric giant. A few days ago, some boys digging in an earth mound a short distance above Manchester, Ohio, brought to light a human skeletons in a good state of preservation that measured over 9 feet in length. The head was of enormous size, the jawbone fitting loosely over the head of a large man. To what race of the past these remains belong and from whence the race came or where they went must forever remain a mystery. The discovery of the bones has created a sensation and is attracting much interest. Large burial mounds that was once situated next to a large earthwork located north of Winchester, Ohio. Okay. The News Herald, Hillsboro, Ohio, October 11th, 1894. A remarkable cave has been discovered on the farm of James Thompson near Winchester, Ohio. Harry Kendall of Cincinnati, while filled with enthusiasm of inspecting the resting places of deceased brothers, the Red Men, made a startling discovery. While inspecting what he thought to the last resting places of Redskins, he came upon a subterranean recess situated in the side of the hill. His first impulse was to enter, but darkness caused him to retrace his steps. He then related his discovery to some neighbors, who, by the aid of lantern, gained admission to this mystic haunt. The cave is cut into several departments, being rudely carved and bearing the marks of ancient tools. A large flat rock was found in one of the rooms with a hollowed center, supposed to be used as a basin. It was made of rough rock resembling in its nature a common milk rock. Several bones were found of men of gigantic stature. Evidence is very strong that the cave was once at one time occupied by the red men, as arrows, flints, etc. were found as well. Large burial mounds located north of Athens at the plains. More burial mounds were found and photographed in Athens County for the travel guide than anywhere else in Ohio. It says here Athens Messenger, April 21st, 1870. The mound had two circular arches of stone in it. One was about 2.5 feet beneath the surface of the mound. and another about 6 feet. Immediately under the first arch of stone was found two very large skeletons in a remarkable state of preservation, and under the second arch wall, other part of skeletons were found amidst ashes, coals, and mussel shells. It seemed apparent that those who had been interred under the deeper arch had remained there many years before those under the upper arch were buried. Some of these skeletons were buried with their heads towards the center of the mound, and some with their feet toward the center. Ohio Democrat, New Philadelphia, Ohio, February 24th, 1871. A giant skeleton, 8 feet 6 inches in length, was recently found on the farm of John Buck in Athens County, Lodi Township, in an old mound. It says here large conical mounds in Athens. Sorry. Uh, so these little mounds, right? This is the house where a house has been built on top. The Stark County Democrat, December 7th, 1900. Giant skeletons unearthed at Athens, though to have been Indians of gigantic, sorry, thought maybe they try to say thought to have been Indians of gigantic proportions. Athens, Ohio, December 6th. The skeletons of two Indians have been unearthed along the banks of the Hawkins River at Roach Mill, 1/2 mile east of Athens. The excavation was made under a large building a short distance from the bank of the river. Unearthed a few feet from the skeletons were many arrowheads, which no doubt were buried with the redskins when they were sent either by accident or natural death to their unhappy hunting grounds. The skeletons were evidently those of gigantic men. Judging by the bones, they could have measured less than 7 feet in stature. The bones were in an excellent state of preservation, the teeth being firmly embedded in the maxillary bones. Okay, and here's some drawings of some of the ancient mounds. All right, in Ohio, Athens. Athens Messenger, August 6, 1903. Mound builder, monuments. The silent witness of gigantic prehistoric race long ago, Wolf Plains was the central place for the tribes who built numerous mounds. What became of the mound builders? Wolf's Plain has long been noted for its many mounds, which seem indicative of its having been a central place for the tribes of people who built them. While a great many of the mounds have been almost obliterated by repeated plowing, yet quite a number remain to give us an idea of their original form and size. It is not known what the exact use of the mounds was, yet the fact that in nearly every one that is open are found skeletons and various trinkets and copper and stone vessels seems to throw some light on the subject. Some claim that they were used as places of burial, but they were evidently used for a variety of purposes. The plain school rests on one of these mounds, which had been plowed and worked down to make it suitable for that purpose. During the process of lowering it, numerous trinkets and vessels were unearthed, among which was a particular article consisting of two rings of copper beads between pieces of buckskin. All was in a perfect state of preservation when found, but the air soon changed the buckskin to dust. A prominent farmer who not long since passed away and from whose name could easily be given, if necessary, kept plowing around the mound until he had nearly plowed it down. Near the bottom, he unearthed the skeleton of a man who had been buried in an erect position. Charcoal was found near the skeleton, showing that for some reason a fire had been made near the deceased. These remains are always men of great stature. When the Hockin Valley Railroad was being built, it was found necessary to remove a portion of one of the nearby hills, or to make a cut, and for this purpose a huge steam shovel was employed. While at work, they found the ancient cemetery. From the skeletons, it is evident that the men were very large. It is said that the bones reaching from the knee to the ground were almost a foot longer than that of the average man of today. These facts, which will be well remembered by many of the older people, indicate that this country was originally inhabited by a race of people of whom we have not the slightest knowledge, except what is contained in their mounds and cemeteries. Centennial Atlas of Athens County, Ohio, 1905. A small mound located on the very top of the hill bordering the eastern part of the Wolf's Plain and a little northwest of the house now occupied by Mr. J. Taylor, superintendent of the Johnson Coal Mine and Company. Mine here was opened by two or three of the citizens in the spring of 1905. They were in search of copper and stone articles, and more especially inscriptions. At the bottom of the mountain, lying on a huge flat stone, was a skeleton apparently of a woman. The lower limbs were crossed. The bones had been much decayed by the action of water. The explorer stated that the bones were remarkably large. The jawbone would fit over that of an average man of today, and leave plenty of places besides. And leave plenty of space besides. The forearm bones, 5 inches larger than those of the average man. Charcoal was found in 3 different layers. Okay. All right, we're gonna go back to the book. Going back and forth, so you guys can see this is like numerous reports all over the place. And we're just going through a couple chapters of these books. The ancient giants who ruled America, the missing skeletons in the great Smithsonian Cover-Up. The Death Valley Temple of the Giants. This story from the Nevada News relates how Dr. F. Bruce Russell, following up on reports that the Smithsonian had hidden evidence of giants found in Death Valley, eventually uncovered a complex of 32 caves in a 180 square mile area around the Nevada, California, Arizona border. Inside the complex of caves, he reported finding the skeletons of 8 and 9-foot giants dressed in animal skins that had been tailored into jackets and pants that resembled prehistoric suits. Russell also reported finding hieroglyphics, extensive weapons, religious artifacts, and cooking utensils. And at the end of the hall, leading from the main temple, he said there was a room filled with the well-preserved remains of dinosaur, right? That's the hijack. Talking about dragons, or what are we talking about? Saber-toothed tigers, imperial elephants, okay? And other extinct beasts paired off in niches as if on display, all right? In Death Valley, Nevada. Atlantis in the Colorado River Desert. Nevada News, 1947, all right? Atlantis, you already know. Near the Nevada, California, Arizona border area, 32 caves within a 180 square mile area were discovered to hold the remains of ancient, strangely custom 8 to 9-foot giants. They had been laid to rest wearing the skins of unknown animals, similar to sheepskins, fashioned into jackets with pants described as prehistoric suits. The same burial place had been found 10 to 15 years earlier by another man who made a deal with the Smithsonian. The evidence of his find was stolen and covered up by Darwinian scientists. All right, you guys hear what happened? Dr. F. Bruce Russell had come to Death Valley from the East Coast for the sake of his health. He had taken up mining in the West and was exploring across the Colorado River into Arizona. What he found he described as the burial place of a tribal hierarchy within the ritual hall of an ancient people. He felt that some unknown catastrophe had driven them into these caves. All of the implements of their civilization were there, including household utensils and stoves. Dr. Russell reported seeing hieroglyphics, okay, chiseled on carefully polished granite within what appeared to be a cavern temple. Another cave led to their sacred hall, which contained carvings of ritual devices and markings similar to those of the Masonic order. A long tunnel from this temple led to a room where Russell said well-preserved remains of dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, imperial elephants, and other extinct beasts were paired off in niches as if on display. 10 to 15 years earlier, the caves had been seen by another miner who had fallen from the bottom of a mine shaft. In his book, Death Valley Men, Borgley related a conversation among residents of Death Valley concerning the local Paiute or Paiute Native American legends of an underground city at Wingate Passage. After falling through the ceiling of an unknown tunnel, the miner had followed it 20 miles north of the Panamint Mountain to discover a huge ancient underground city. Okay? And I bet you we've actually read the actual newspaper reports. This sounds like something we've read already. Shout out to the archivist with analog. I think we've read this the original newspaper report on this. All right, so Underground city, guys, all right? He saw arching stone walls with huge stone doors and a polished round table in the center of the council chamber, which had once been lit by ingenious lights fueled by subterranean gases. Leaning against the walls were their tall gold spears. Sorry. He said that the designs on their thick golden armbands resembled the work of the Egyptians. Okay, just like the Egyptians, the tunnel ended at an exit overlooking Furnace Creek Ranch in California's Imperial Valley. You hear where it ended? So he got it in Nevada. He ended up in California. He could see from there that the valley had once been underwater. The tunnel entrance had been a dock or a quay located halfway up the side of the mountain. A deal was made with the Smithsonian Museum for the find, but the miner was betrayed by his partner. The evidence was stolen and the entrance concealed. In 1940, Mining Journal, another find was reported of much worked gold found in an 8-mile long cave near San Bernardino. You guys hear what they're doing, the Smithsonian? University of Arizona professor Vinay Deloria, himself a Native American, made a similar accusation against the Smithsonian for covering up the remains found within the burial mounds of the mound builder civilization. Surviving diaries from before the time of Darwin attest to these discoveries. The mound builders were a different civilization than that of the Indians, they said. The mounds contained the remains of hundreds of giants along with the bones of giant mastodons. In Cincinnati, Ohio, the giant bones were found with large shields, swords, and engraved stone tablets. In Kentucky and Tennessee, the bones of powerful men of towering stature were excavated. One of these 7-foot men was buried with an engraved copper plate beneath his head. A woman was also found. She was wearing a silver girdle with letters written on it. The Detroit Free Press reported in 1884 the discovery in Gardensville, Mississippi, of the remains of a giant with waist length jet black hair. He was wearing a copper crown. With him in his timber burial vault were his children, who wore garments decorated with bone beads. The tomb was covered with large flagstones engraved with inscriptions. In Cayuga Township, Niagara, there is a place called the Cemetery of Giants, which was discovered in 1880. Those giants were 9 feet tall and appeared to have died violent deaths. Their axes were found with them. Giant bones were also unearthed from a rock fissure on Lake Erie Island. In some of the finds of giant bones, the bones lay in confusion as if left in battlefield. The Smithsonian does display some artifacts of the mound builders found with the bones of the giants, shell discs, and carved stone beads. Many of the bones turned to powdery ash within a short time of being exposed to the air. The Smithsonian has been reluctant to test some less fragile finds. The late Vine Deloria said that it is because they might find a really early date for the bones, and that it would be distressing to the Darwinian timeline, okay? It will rewrite history in all their false chronologies. That's why. Smithsonian removes 564 skeletons. 564 skeletons, okay? They removed. Kern County, California. Find also contains 4,000 specimens of ancient Indian life. Bakersfield, California, March 28, 1934. More than 4,000 artifacts and hundreds of Indian burials have been excavated at the site of the Tuolumne Company lease near Taft during the past 3.5 months. It was okay, so it was revealed, sorry, it was revealed here today with the announcement that the camp of workers supported by federal funds will all be dispersed by Friday. The archaeological projects, which have employed varyingly from 100 to 90 to 26 men retained to make the final surveys, have been directed by Dr. W.T. Strong and W.M. Walker, assistant from the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institution, with Dr. Edwin F. Walker as archaeologist and W.R. Weddle as assistant archaeologist. In the opinion of directors, two or more months could be spent excavating the Kern Indian mounds. The archaeological projects, which have employed varyingly from 190 to the 26 men retained to make the final surveys, have been directed by Dr. W. T. Strong and W. M. Walker, assistant from the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institution, with Dr. Edwin F. Walker as archaeologist and W. R. Weddell as assistant archaeologist. In the opinion of the directors, 2 more months could be. Oh man, I just read that. Sorry about that, guys. My son came in here and real quick, I got lost. The artifacts uncovered, classified and shipped to the Smithsonian Institution include mortar and pestles, flint points, bone tools, textiles, shells, and soapstone beads, and other ornaments, stone vessels, and fragments of basketry. A total of 564 skeletons were uncovered in the burial mounds, of which 348 were taken from the first mound. Not all the skeletons found were considered good specimens. One of the last to be uncovered had been interred in a round hole with the body flexed grotesquely to make it fit the chosen grave. 3,000 specimens were uncovered in the first mound and 1,000 from the second mound, which was conceded to be much older in time than the first. Documenting the finds. A topography map of the mounds and the excavation area has been made by Pavey L. Stanley of Bakersfield, who headed one of the excavation crews, and it will be filed with the collection at the Smithsonian. Mr. Walker is returning to Washington, D.C., and will study the local collection and write a report on the finds for the Smithsonian Institution that will make clear Kern County's contribution to filling in the larger picture of prehistoric human life on the American continent. I guess we were stuck waiting for that. Skeletons of early Indians are unexpectedly unearthed. Los Angeles Herald Examiner, January 20, 1930. Students of early California history have turned their attention to the discovery of an early Indian burial ground near Carpinteria, uncovered unexpectedly by a crew of workmen making a cut through a cliff for a road to the beach. Some of the traditional Indian burial customs were revealed as the great steam shovel tore open the graves. The skeletons were found lying face down, foreheads resting on surface stones, with arrowheads, cooking utensils, and other articles buried with them. The story of the savages' graves was related in Los Angeles by George A. MacDonald, local broker on whose property the burial ground was uncovered by a drilling crew engaged in running a road to the beach for oil drilling work. Scores of skeletons. For 80 feet from the place where a steam shovel started digging into the edge of the cliff, which dropped straight to the ocean's edge, skeletons of Indians were uncovered by the score, according to MacDonald. In the majority of the graves, the Indians were lying on their faces, their heads towards the west. In one grave, a mother and her child were discovered. A mother, sorry, I said mortar. A mother and her child were discovered. The mother had one arm half circling the infant. Close by was the skeleton of a brave. Embedded in his forehead was an arrow, one which undoubtedly struck him down during battle more than a century ago. Hundreds of arrowheads, a number of grinding and mixing bowls, and other articles were buried with the bodies. Many of the skulls had been removed from the property with the permission of the owner. When Roscoe Ames, drilling superintendent, encountered the old burial ground, he immediately halted excavation and made a preliminary investigation. He asked MacDonald for permission to continue, and given the right, resumed building the road to the edge of the cliff, and throughout the entire distance turned up many of the skeletons. All right, many skeletons, hundreds of skeletons, some sticking out. When word was received of the discovery at Carpinteria, classes from nearby schools were dismissed to visit the old burial grounds and to study the various finds. According to MacDonald, the cemetery may stretch many feet out and around the road under construction. and hundreds of skeletons probably would be found if that entire area were excavated. Parts of skeletons could be seen sticking out over the edge of the newly excavated portion of the road, and these were pulled out of the ground by members of the steam shovel crew and tossed in a heap. Sightseers removed the pieces. McDonald owns the property, and for many feet into the ocean fronting the old burial ground, the oil well will be drilled out in the ocean and within a stone's throw of the cemetery. All right. So that's the end of chapter 2. In this book, we're going to leave this book right here. Okay. We're going to read a little bit more of the the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America by Fritz Zimmerman. Okay, where were we? All right. It says the small rise to the right of the road and left of the bar marks the spot of the giant's tomb. It says here, The Messenger, Athens, Ohio, July 5th, 1970. Let's see. Actually, we're going to leave it right here because I think we're already in another chapter. Hold on, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the reading, though. I mean, you guys see all the different reports. There's so many. Again, shout out to the archivist who's in the chat. He's got a lot of the original newspaper reports. Okay. So we read all this. We read the Mediterranean Amorite. Check out those videos previous to this. Indian Legends of Ancient Race of Giants. And we just read the Giants of the Ohio Valley. Okay. Let's see. Arizona. Yeah. Okay, so the next chapter is about ancient dwarfs and fairies, huh? So definitely we're gonna get into that. So a lot of giants in Ohio, as we're noticing. A lot of giants in Ohio, guys. All right. It was a little easier when, we had the voiceover with the people reading the audio. It's not easy reading like, this long. It's just like hurting my jaw trying to make sure I don't mess up. So hopefully I didn't mess up too much. Thanks for hearing me out, reading with my accents and all in every language. I got accents in every language. But thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed the information. It's here so you guys can see. Now it's on a video form. You can access it. You can find the books yourself. I have them in my Patreon a lot of this stuff. If you'd like to go check it out. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for taking time out of your Sunday to be here with me again. And again, last night's video was taken down, so I uploaded it on my Patreon page. I have a link there to my Google Drive where you can download it and watch it. All right. And remember, this image right here we're looking at is supposed to be from Serpent Mound in Athens County, Ohio. All right. That's huge, if true, right? Pretty amazing stuff, man. And we know, Canaan was full of giants. We know the Promised Land had giants. It all matches with scripture as well, and all the oral stories, that we have, the ancestors have. It all correlates, right? Again, they hid all of this from us. Like if they really told us the number of reports, all this, if they really had a whole class on this, it would be so abundant. Like there would be so much information that they would make a study of it. This would be a thing, and this would be kind of rewriting history, right? And all that Darwinism, right, out of Africa, Darwinism, because they don't fit. These people don't fit in his Darwinism thing, So it's all good. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it right there. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. And Hewa, right? Peace. Hewa or Hawa. Agua. Agua. Hawa.
20,000